Hello, class. We are back with Anne Killigrew, and the work of hers that we read for class this week is the poem Upon the Saying That My Verses Were Made by Another. What do you know? That encompasses like a huge concern of the women writers of this time period, right? That if they wrote, and even if they get published, people will say, oh, somebody else wrote those verses. You didn't do it. You're a woman, right? You couldn't have done it. Therefore, you stole them from someone else. Remember, we just heard Anne Bradstreet say that in the prologue. And now we hear Anne Killigrew echoing the very same sentiment in the actual title of this poem of hers that we read this week, Upon the Saying That My Verses Were Made by Another. And okay, a little bit about my background. Looks a little different, huh? Well, yeah, here we are. This kind of embodies a little bit of what these women were dealing with. Remember Virginia Woolf? She wrote about a room of one's own, right? That excerpt of hers we read week 1. And that's what women need to be able to write. They need a room of their own so that they can concentrate and devote themselves and focus and spend that time writing and thinking and have that quiet to be able to create. They also, in addition to the room of one's own, those women need means to support themselves, right? Because you can't write if you have to spend all your time doing some other job to earn money to support yourself, or doing some other thing like caring for a gigantic family or a home and a family. You need to have support, financial support, and you need a room of your own to be able to write so that you can spend time in quiet, concentrating, thinking, planning, and actually writing. So here I am in the only room of my own that I have right now in my house. Uh, as you know, like kind of like Anne Bradstreet. Anne Bradstreet said had 8 kids. I have 7 kids and one nephew who also has become part of our family. So essentially 8 kids. And I am in the only room where I can be by myself and talk in my entire house right now. So I very much embody these women who so desperately search for those rooms of their own so that they have time to create and write and produce. So this is embodying what we're talking about. Here's the only room of my own. It's a storage closet in my house. All right, so that's a little bit of a metaphor for what these for the the circumstances these women deal with. I'm not saying this is anywhere near what they deal with, but it's just a little taste, just a little bit of a small window into their lives, where they're constantly caring for others and toiling away. And Anne Bradstreet, my goodness, lived on the edge of a rugged wilderness. This is nowhere, near what she had. I have heat, air conditioning. I have, walls made of sturdy materials. So I'm in no means saying I'm on their level. This is just a tiny little aspect of what they dealt with, on a much greater and deeper scale. So anyway, on to Anne Killigrew. There are some uh, websites in the written out lecture that you might want to take a look at if you want to see more of her poems or a little bit more about Anne Killigrew herself. This poem or this website in particular, bestpoems.net/Anne Killigrew, has a lot of her poems. The sheer quantity of the poems that she wrote is most impressive, especially when you consider how young she actually died. Anne Killigrew lived from 1660 to 1685, till only about 25 years of age, and yet she wrote a ton of poems. Very sadly, she died of smallpox, at about 25 years old. Smallpox is a disease that we don't actually deal with anymore. It has been pretty much eradicated from the world. Um, we got a vaccine, right, that made everybody immune, and so that was enabled us to wipe it out. But unfortunately, Anne Killigrew, she fell prey to that very deadly virus. It killed about a third of the people who came down with it. And if you didn't die, your face was left very pockmarked. In fact, there are paintings of George Washington where you can see that he's had smallpox. So it's like chicken pox, but much more deadly, much worse, and pox your face all over. Right. All right. So, yeah, sad life. Sad life. Short life, but a very productive one. Anne was the daughter of the chaplain to the Duke of York. Her father was a dramatist himself, and the atmosphere in which Anne grew up and was raised encouraged women to develop their talents. She was even the maid of honor to the Duchess of York. Anne's uncles also wrote plays, including Thomas Killigrew, whose play actually inspired Aphra Bane's play, The Rover. Kind of interesting, yeah. So there's some crossover between our writers here. Thomas Killigrew, one of Anne's uncles, wrote a play that inspired Aphra Bane to write her play, The Rover, which is probably her most famous, and we have that YouTube clip of in the lecture as well. Anyway, with all this privilege and learning, Anne was still prey to the social climate, believe it or not. The poem we read here of Anne's is even entitled Upon the Saying That My Verses Were Made by Another. That is still a huge concern for these women writers. The chief issue, obviously, is Anne's desire for acknowledgement of her poetic achievement. Yet her indignation when people do not believe that a woman would be capable of writing the poems that Anne, in fact, writes. Reminiscent of something we read from Anne Bradstreet in her prologue, and so perhaps a continuing and highly revelatory female concern that we will continue tracing throughout our class. That we know anything at all about a young woman who died from smallpox over 300 years ago, and who died so young, is a strong testament to the acclaim and acknowledgement that Anne so wanted, but did not think she had in her brief life of 25 years. So she thought she would be forgotten or unnoticed, or if she was noticed, that people would attribute her writings to someone else, to a male, to a man. Yet here we are, over 300 years later, reading Anne's poetry and knowing that she did write it. So that's a testament to what she wrote. And that's a testament to her abilities. So enjoy Anne Killigrew and the poem of hers that we read this week in class, Upon the Saying That My Verses Were Made by Another. Enjoy.